Mr. Totterville. Thanks for coming in to see me.
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And reading over the notes here, I see that you've already had your initial eval and you've scheduled your appointment.
Yes.
Here today, and I'm going to get some more information from you, and we're going to get into the evaluation and termination process here for your interview.
Okay.
Now you're you're a war veteran. How many tours did you?
2.
2 tours?
Oh, I have.
Okay, you were, so you were with the Army then?
2nd Regiment.
2nd Regiment. And where were your deployments to?
Iraq, and I did 1 service in Kabul in Afghanistan.
Okay. How long was each tour for you?
First tour was 2 years in Iraq, and then I spent another 2 years over in Kabul in Afghanistan. The job was to clear road mines, IEDs and such.
Explain to me, before we get into implementing some of these techniques and coping skills here for you, and some therapies we're going to get you involved in here. I just want to touch base a little bit on what was your background, if you can explain to me, before you even enlisted or went off to the Army, your upbringing, siblings, did you get along with your family?
My family, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I got along with my brother, mother, and father. There was no issues. It was fine. We had our family fights, but who doesn't have fights?
Right.
Everything was fine. I played football in high school. Normal Southern kid life. After high school, I got into construction. I was a laborer. I worked with concrete for a while, and I wanted to keep up with family tradition because my dad joined the Air Force. My granddad was in the Army. Every male member of my family was in the military.
I was just going to ask what made you want to enlist, but that seems like a good enough reason there.
We were all fighters, so.
Yeah. About from a standpoint of once you had gone through the trainings and whatnot you had to for your branch, and you had your first deployment, spending some time overseas, did you notice any emotional, psychological, mental things that at the time were starting to affect you? Did it seem to progress, obviously, the longer you were there? Or
you're talking about before I got deployed or during my deployment?
During your deployment, right.
First 8 months or so, it was awesome. We were all having a good old time. We had that thrill, that thrill of being out there on the hunt all the time. Mm-hmm. And we were pretty much one giant family there, and there was not really any issues until the sad event, that IED went off, and after that my whole mindset changed, and I didn't want to be there anymore.
Did you receive, after the specific incident you had, did you receive any immediate attention or treatments there from obviously non-physical related, from any kind of...
I couldn't see anybody at the time because we still had another year and 4 months to go. Okay. Until that time, I just pretty much, it became about survival. Right. And that's all I focused on, was surviving. So keeping everyone alive.
The only people you really had to rely on or even talk to about what was going on is just
my fellow veterans, my brothers.
Brothers you're fighting with. And this had started on after your first deployment.
Yes.
Had you had any previous issues before you were even into the Army, growing up as a child? Depression, anxiety, social phobias, and drug addictions?
I did have anger issues, but apart from that, not really. I would get into fights. I did have a charge for aggravated assault. But apart from that, no, not really.
So some anger issues. Were you treated and seeing a doctor for any of these, counseling or any sort? Or?
Court made me go to anger management classes for about 3 months, and I took it as a joke pretty much.
And that was for the assault charge.
Yes, I was 17. I was young, always getting in fights. But
now, as your first deployment continued and you went and did another tour, deployed again, what was your emotional state of mind
going into my second tour?
Into the second tour, yeah. The more field experience you were.
I didn't really want to do it, but if I went another 2 years, I would be able to get higher track air benefits. I would have had a greater military retirement. And honestly, when I was done with my first deployment, I was at home for about 6 months. And just trying to get a job and be normal, I guess, drive to work and stuff like that. It was boring and it was hard.
So the transition.
Yeah,
the transition has been rocky for you.
I was like, I already did 2 years and I was just going to do another 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why not? And I was good at it. We were good at fighting IEDs.
Right.
I felt like it gave me some purpose.
You more or less felt coming back after the first one that, hey, this is the only thing. This is what I know. This is what I live. This is who I am. There's nothing else out there for me. This is what I do.
I felt like there was more I could do in life, but I felt like what I was good at that moment was being over there. So voluntarily, I went ahead and re-enlisted, and that's when I went to Afghanistan. I went to Kabul.
Since coming home now from your last deployment, did you get in touch with the VA, or have you had any seen a doctor, had any kind of counseling or treatment since you've come to us? Or
After my first deployment, I didn't receive any kind of therapy or anything like that. I did get a psych eval done by a therapist, and I'm not going to go into detail. Pretty much, I wasn't crazy. That was pretty much the end result of it. But aside from that, no, I just saw my PCP over in Oakland. That was about it. It wasn't until...
So did they determine then that you were suffering from at least a mild to moderate PTSD?
After the first tour, no.
This was after the second.
After the second tour, that's when they found out, and I found out, I guess, that I had issues.
After the psych eval you received, had you been suffering from depression, anxiety?
I did get some anxiety, like driving at high speeds was one thing I would have like realizations, like I'm actually going really fast, and I would slow down, and there were certain things that I would do before, like reckless things that I would do before that I don't do anymore. Yeah.
And that's completely common with post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
Tell me about some triggers you've had dealing with it. Things that trigger you, or could trigger your anger, even the depression, anxiety. And depression, anxiety are those are symptoms that are going to go along with that. Obviously, especially in the immediate transition from the time you arrive back home,
Right.
Until you're trying to get incorporated back into society, and the VA's helping with that. But like nightmares,